Welcome to the Real View podcast, where Ohio Realtors connect you to innovators and influencers, keeping you with the real view of real estate. Whether you're a broker, agent, first-time homebuyer, industry leader, or just happen to stumble upon our podcast today, you can expect to hear tips, tools, tricks, interesting information, and so much more from the experts in Ohio's real estate game. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Real View podcast. I am your host, Allison Wiley. Joining me today is Luis Ortiz. I'd like to welcome him onto the show. The Luis Ortiz Group is a standout real estate team at Keller Williams Realty. They're known for their top-notch service and professionalism with diverse expertise in various areas like helping first-time homebuyers, sellers, and managing teams. They make sure every client's needs are met smoothly. What sets this group apart is their diverse background and skills. They work together, bringing different perspectives to the table. They're also active in the community and speak Spanish, making them accessible to a wider audience. Their commitment to excellence and client satisfaction makes them trusted leaders in real estate. Luis, welcome on to the show today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on and sharing the knowledge and kind of collaborating here.
Absolutely. And we are going to talk a little bit about just some options that are out there to help our potential home buyers and any new clients out there get into new homes, help make that home ownership dream accessible for more people. But before we get into that conversation today, I would like to hear a little bit more about you. Could you tell us about yourself, how you got started in real estate, and what's led you to where you are today?
Sure. So I got into real estate. First of all, my background's in environmental science. So I did oil tanks, wetlands, all that kind of environmental stuff when it comes to industrial properties. And then as I wanted to purchase my first property, I decided that why not take the jump and get my real estate license like a lot of realtors do, part-time job. And I quickly realized that I wanted to be full-time and help more people. And so I left my job. I then joined the team. And from there, I learned a lot on the team. I expanded the team and then flowed onto my own and started my own team. And from there, I've been going into a whole bunch of different things. So right now I have my team. I am a coach at Keller Williams. I've been to 2 brokerages and I've been in the business now 7 years, and I love it. And I love helping families start and, transitioning all real estate. So
I love that. Well, thanks for sharing a little bit more of your background and journey. I always like kind of hearing people's story and where they came from and how they got started in real estate. So thanks for sharing a little bit. And that's why I think, you're such a great person to have on the show and to talk about this, because you're living and breathing it every day and, coaching others, as you mentioned, into doing something similar. In your experience and from what you're seeing and working with your clients and being involved, in everyday, day-to-day real estate journeys, what are some challenges that you're seeing out there that exist in today's market, or some barriers that you're hearing a lot or seeing a lot that come up when you're working with clients today?
yeah, so a lot of the barriers is the lack of inventory here in New Jersey and PA. I'm duly licensed, and PA, we do have, lack of inventory. On top of that, high interest rates. So that is, making it difficult, multiple offers for people. As far as sellers, they're doing great, but on the buying side, it's a much harder aspect, and then when sellers do sell, sometimes I come in and sometimes I tell the sellers, maybe it's not the time right now. And yes, it may not be the time right now just because it may not be affordable for them. They want the same payment or potentially something where it's not much more and it doesn't make sense for them, right? So even though they may be getting a lot of return from their property, it's still sometimes not enough. So I'm seeing it on both ends. Yeah. So those are some of the challenges.
Yeah, because like you mentioned, it is such a, great market, great time to sell for sellers. But it's interesting that, you're actually finding like, hey, it might not be, that great time. And here's what to think about. And that's kind of the role that, we should be playing as realtors, right? As being that guide, being that, person, that advisor who's able to kind of take a look at what they're looking for and advise them on like what's best and what might not be best, even though they might have that in their head.
Yeah, sometimes it works out, but sometimes it doesn't. I've run into that a couple times now, and in some sellers, I'm like, I think you're better off just staying put, where you are.
Yeah, and I know, you mentioned inventory and that being, a challenge. And, I think it's starting to go up. Maybe we're starting to see a little bit improvements. I know I've seen some numbers from Lawrence Yoon and the team, economic team over at NAR, and might be like trending a little bit better. What are you seeing? Are you seeing that improving at all a little bit, or still kind of just not so good?
No, it's definitely has been improving. It's definitely not what it was, COVID times and things like that, but it's definitely still hard. It's still very difficult for people. So it's just challenging. There's still multiple offers. It's not taking 20 offers to get one accepted, but it's maybe like 5 to 10 now, right? So it's a much better opportunity for people. And, some of that comes with advising the client too. So, if they're pre-qualified to 350, 400, whatever that may be, I always tell them look less and, maybe take some things that maybe is not what you would want, and maybe put some repairs on your own. And then you can then go from there, and then that way you can compete, because you're not at your max budget when it comes to your pre-qualification. So sometimes it takes a little bit, maybe not getting exactly maybe what you wanted at 400, but if you're looking at like 350, 360, 370, you can compete and win those offers. So
No, I think that's a great bit of advice. And I think that can kind of be confusing too, with home buyers is, they get that pre-approval and it's like, okay, well, that's my budget. And it's like, no, just because you're pre-approved for that amount doesn't mean, you have to use that full amount. And I think that that's a really good strategy, to say like, hey, maybe look at a house that's, a little bit on the lower end of what your budget is and know that, you can come in, be competitive and make those repairs or renovations if you need to. That might be a better option for your client, and it helps makes them more competitive too when we think about inventory, and that there's still sometimes multiple 5, 10 offers on a property, which is still a lot.
yeah, it is.
Yeah, definitely a lot to look out for. I know that's something we're constantly here in Ohio too is a challenge, and we're working, with our lawmakers and local governments and state, and just, how can we get more homes out there, and how do we get sellers to sell but then not become buyers too, and then they need a new place and that's not really helping inventory. So
Right. Yeah, it's like that whole cycle, you don't want that cycle. You want people to get into places for sure.
yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about affordability a little bit because I know that's something that's been top of mind for us here at Ohio Realtors. I'm sure for you in Jersey and PA. What are you seeing when it comes to affordability right now? What are some of the challenges that may exist in today's market? And talk to us a little bit about affordability.
So when it comes to affordability, the rates don't help, the high sixes, low sevens. And so again, it's more looking into seeing what is out there. So is there any down payment assistance? Is there any grants that are out there? So I try to partner up with great lenders so that, and get myself educated. So I am also president, or I was president of the National Hispanic Real Estate Professional, and now I'm past president serving on the board, but it's a great place to network. So I'm constantly meeting lenders and seeing what programs they have. Here in Jersey, we have the NJHMFA Home Finance Mortgage Agency, and they do have a down payment assistance grant that's forgivable after 5 years. It's 10,000 in our area. In North Jersey, the cost of living is higher, so it's 15,000 up there, and their income limits are pretty outstanding. I believe they're around 160,000 now. So a lot of people do qualify for it. It used to be state funded, but it no longer isn't. Now it's pretty much self funded. And also they have, if you're a first generational homeowner, there's an additional 7,000. Yeah, so in our area, we could get up to 17,000, and I believe in North Jersey is around 32. So I'm in South Jersey. So there's a lot out there too. There's county grants, sometimes there are city grants. So I always encourage people, do some research. The only thing with some county grants and city grants and things like that is that the income limit. So it's hard to get most people into those programs. So that's the only thing. But there are people that do fit into that box. So I encourage, people to look into those. I'm always looking to see if there's any grants or down payment assistance. A lot of lenders now are offering 1,000 to 5,000. So and then you can put that on top of like the New Jersey grant or down payment assistance. So there's a whole bunch of different things to look into when it comes to the individual. So that's when having a whole bunch of trusted partners is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great, bit of advice and absolutely something that realtors should be researching and looking into. And do you see a lot of your clients taking advantage of those programs and having success with using some of these programs, being able to, kind of cross that line with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think knowing as a realtor how the grant works, like it could take anywhere depending on the individual, 30 to 45 days, and also the state, their turnaround time. So it gets approved by the lender, and then the lender then shoots over the application over to the state. The state then reviews it. But if you have a really good lender and they're experienced with the loan, they typically get it done quickly. Obviously, the buyer has to do their role and be quick about the process as well. But as long as you're quick, it could be 30 to 45 days. On the worst end, it'll be 60 days. But it's a fantastic program. And again, it has its challenges in this market, but they do get accepted.
Yeah, it's really just another tool in the toolbox that you're able, to offer your clients, and just even presenting it as an option, and whether it's a right fit for everyone or not, I think that comes down to every specific client, but just being able to offer that as an option. And if they do decide to pursue that and it does take them over that hump and relieves the barrier, it's just a great, great option to have, and something that we should all be looking into. Do you know of any specific programs with Freddie Mac or some of those, large lending companies that would kind of fall under this category as well?
Right. So Freddie Mac has like the home buyer. It's the Freddie Mac Home Possible. They have very interesting names, and then depending on who the lender is, they kind of change the name. So, but they do have the Home Possible, and that also has income limits, and they have maps and things like that. One of the things that I do love that Freddie Mac has is called a DPA1, Down Payment Assistance 1. And so basically what that is a website where you can go to Freddie Mac put together, and you put in an address and it tells you all the different assistance programs that are in that area. So that's one of the things I look into a lot. And then, I then see what's available. I then go to a lender and I say, hey, these are the things. Does this person qualify for any of these things? And there's a whole bunch of different grants per area. Again, the thing that makes it challenging is the qualifications to those grants. Sometimes they can't be used together. Sometimes there's an income limit. Sometimes there's a area constraint. So it's only specific to certain census tracts. So, but that's the one thing. The other thing that Freddie Mac has is Home Buyer U. That is more for the consumer, but I 100% recommend, just because it's good for you to see. A lot of these programs have an educational component, so you can then help your client if they need to. You can help them. So I always recommend realtors to go through the seminars. A lot of times they're, about credit and finances and things like that. But that is also another. And that way, when your client is going through the program, you can help them too if they need that assistance, and move them further through the transaction.
Yeah, a lot of options out there, right? And I mean, you've done such a great job in educating yourself on them, staying up to date, as they change and what those qualifications are, how to know if your client's going to qualify for something like that or not, working with those lenders, asking them those questions. What advice would you give to realtors in the best way that they can kind of get on your level, or, level themselves up and become an expert in this, and be able to guide their clients? What advice would you give to them into how to become more knowledgeable on this?
Yeah, so I mean, being a part of professional organizations, I truly believe in that. I've been exposed to a lot of different lenders from different banks, from different organizations, being educated. interviewing people, seeing what their background is, seeing who they help and if they're using grants and things like that, calling the state and local agencies to see what kind of programs and who they partner with, because they have certain people that are on their list of qualified who can do those different types of programs if it's a state program. So that's some of the resources that I would say is really important, and just getting yourself out there and educating, having conversations, just that's the way to kind of grow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the expanding your network, getting out there, attending industry events, coming to, conventions and things like that can really help you in building those relationships, growing your knowledge, growing your experience, and really ultimately growing your business. And I mean, I'm going to assume, but, correct me if I'm wrong, that knowing all of this and being able to guide your clients in this, that has really helped you grow your business, right?
Absolutely, because
Yeah.
the least amount of hiccups you have in a transaction, the better that experience is for that client. And therefore, the more referrals you're going to get from that client, the better the review is going to be. Instead of them saying, oh, well, I didn't know where to go, or, I didn't get any down payment assistance or any types of grants, anything that you have a client feel like they're around very knowledgeable people and the transaction's very smooth. You can't control aspects, but knowing how to explain things and why they're doing the certain things that they're doing really helps a person move forward and have a better experience. So I would say 100% being educated in the process, how it works, or if you don't know, align yourself with somebody who does, makes the process so much better.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a really great skill set to have, when we are still in such a competitive market, being able to offer these solutions, especially to first time home buyers. I think they might not be aware of everything that's out there. And, that could be your role. What role do you kind of see realtors play, when it comes to this, or how do we fit in? You explain some situations of how you help guide your clients, but what's like the best case scenario for how we can help our clients through this?
Best case scenario. So give me a little bit more, like I'm trying to understand what you're kind of conveying.
Yeah. So I guess what's our role in presenting this? How do you handle those conversations with your clients? How are you kind of handling this throughout the whole transaction? What's the role of our realtor versus, what some of the client responsibilities? And I think you mentioned, a little bit, client needs to be doing this. Talk to us about kind of that process, how we fit in throughout that transaction.
Gotcha. Okay. Yes. So I'm a very big component of buyer consultations, 100%. So buyer consultations, I don't show any properties. And, with the new laws of buyer agency, that also is a big role too. But I would need the buyer agency. And as in addition to, I would have the buyer do a buyer consultation, regard if that's in person, which is my preferred method, or at least virtual. With a buyer consultation, I go over the whole process, what it looks like when it's multiple offers, what a contract looks like, what an offer looks like. I go over, what are some of the potential grants that they could get, so, and maybe down payment assistance. And I let them know, depending on the property, depending on the area, it could depend on if you can either use these grants slash down payment assistance, or if they may choose to not use it at all. Because if they really want the house, sometimes they have to make that decision, even though they qualify for these types of helps and assistance. So those are the types of things that I like to do. And I like to tell buyers, do the home buyer you. If you have questions, so that way they're doing their role too, right? They're talking to the lender. I connect them, but I can only take you so far. You have to kind of do your own thing. So, and I explain, now another thing with affordability I go over is, how does compensation work? That's a big thing now. Is the seller paying it? Are you paying it? What can you afford? So those are other things that I also go over in the buyer consultations. I set expectations, I'll show them, if they're looking in a certain area, these are the properties that are listed in the area. This is the average that's going on, and, average sale prices. So this is the percent change. Typically, if it's listed at this price, you're most likely going to see it increase by a certain amount. So there's a lot of things like that I like to educate my buyers. It also helps when we're making offers, they make quick decisions because they already know a lot of the process. So instead of them seeing a contract or an offer proposal to purchase for the first time, they're not taking 2 days to sign it when we have to be quick, So it's a very, I can't say enough about buyer consultations. So
Well, it sounds like it's just really a great opportunity to lay everything out on the table, right? And making sure that the client's prepared. None of this is going to be a surprise if stuff like that comes up. They are walking into this process knowing and expecting to get a certain level of service and what you're providing. And I agree. I think it's a great opportunity to get that all out on the table, make sure everyone is as prepared and ready as they can be, and of course stuff is going to come up, right? Of course, there might be something that doesn't, that's not talked about in the consultation that comes up later, down the line. But I think for the most part, it's a great way to make sure that all of the clients, are at least prepared to the best extent that they can be, as they enter into this process, that they are aware of, the possible lending options out there, the assistance programs that are available to them. Just really helps them get ready and prepared, to enter what can kind of be a crazy process sometimes.
right. Yeah, exactly. And as things come up, it's just more or less addressing them and explaining what they are and that becomes part of the process. So
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned too, like talking about compensation during that. And that's something I feel like we talked a lot about last year, of course, with all of the NAR changes and that, this really went into effect last summer. But now we're about 6 months into those changes, right? And just making sure that those conversations are being had, that that's something, that your client is feeling comfortable with, that the seller is feeling comfortable with, that all parties, are on a good page with, I think is really important to make sure that's being talked about as well. I want to kind of talk about the future. If you had your crystal ball in front of you, right, what do you think are going to be some options that might be out there that are up and coming? Are you aware of anything that could, come up when it comes to addressing some of this, whether it's, affordability, inventory? What trends or things are you seeing that could possibly shape the future of affordable homeownership?
here in Jersey, I'm hearing a couple things. People are working on projects, some construction projects to increase housing. I'm also hearing that rates might drop down a little bit, and that's kind of like exciting news. I'm also hearing a little bit about Bitcoin, actually a decent amount.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I heard that recently the first transaction that was all with cryptocurrency just closed.
Wow.
Yeah, so I hear a lot of that going around. I think there's a class coming here in our office soon about it. So I'm hearing a lot about that. I do think that the market is gonna shift a little. I don't think prices are gonna shift as much, but I think that there's gonna be a little bit more inventory coming up. That's what I've been hearing. So I'm excited. Hopefully that is the case, right? So
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what the future brings. I know that since COVID, things have slowly, it's gotten a little bit easier. I'm seeing less and less when it comes to offers, and multiple offers are not as prevalent in the amounts of them, when it comes to offers. So I think we're heading in the right direction for sure. So
Yeah, I think that's good news all around, right? And I'm like so fascinated on this Bitcoin stuff. I'm like, okay, so yeah, we're gonna like know all this government assistance that's out there, know all of our Freddie Mac options, and also yeah, maybe Bitcoin could be an option for some people too, right?
yeah.
So that's crazy. It's just, and I had someone on the podcast last week, and we were talking about just changes and how this industry's evolved, especially since COVID, as you mentioned, and now that we're 5 years removed from that, and is there really ever a time when it's like normal? Like I feel like it's always changing. So I think people out there who, would be like, can we just like slow down or can we just like be normal? Like, I don't think normal is ever going to happen again.
No, I don't think so either, and I feel like even with the deals, the buyers can be prepped and all that. And I just feel there's always some kind of complication here or there. There's something that's popping out nowadays. It's not smooth for any reason, for some reason. So, but that's what we do. We take it and we come up with solutions and we get it to the table. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to know what's next for you as we're talking about the future. I mean, you've had so much success. You sound like you're such a great person to work with, just a great advisor to your clients. But what's next for you in your business? I know you mentioned some of your leadership and things you've been involved with. What can we expect next from you, or what are you hoping to accomplish in the future?
So right now, I just transitioned to KW. I used to be at Berkshire Hathaway, and I transitioned to KW, and I took on the role of being a coach. So, and this has only been since October of last year. So I'm pretty, new to the position, but I plan to grow. I want to double the amount of coaching agents and really educate them and come with a lot of new resources for them and just share my knowledge. But that's what I'm planning, to double the coaching agents' productivity and also, get people out there. And for my own business, I also want to increase that as well with my team. So that's kind of my overall goal. But right now I'm really focusing on the coaching. I just want educated realtors to be out in the field and be professional and spread knowledge and be a collaborative space. There's enough piece of the pie. Even though it's tough, there's enough piece of the pie out there for everyone.
Absolutely. No, you sound like you have so much knowledge to share with people too, so I think you're such a great person, like coming on the show today to have on, because you're so willing to share and so willing to help make people better. And I think that's such a great perspective to have, is like, yes, essentially we all are competitive and are in competition with each other, but really, we're not. And like you said, there's enough of this to go around for everybody. And we all have the same duty as realtors to be that profession, to be putting on our best face every day. And, we are all working together on our reputation. And I think, when you think of it like that, it's really a great perspective to have. So I appreciate your perspective, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing all this knowledge, and best of luck to you in the future. And I know you're going to go on to do great things, and our industry is better with you in it. So I want to thank you so much, Luis, again, for coming on, for sharing all this wonderful information, and for your time today.
Well, thank you, Allison. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. And to all of our listeners, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll be back with you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Real View. That wraps up today's episode. You can keep up with the latest on the podcast at ohiorealtors.org/therealview and on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Have questions, comments, or suggestions? We want to hear from you. Email us at podcast@ohiorealtors.org. We'll see you next time.